Thank you very much. This is me, Meg Roberts, and we're going to be talking about the way that you write as a business online and offline and anywhere else, to be honest. But I wanted to start with online and the digital world because I think it's really interesting what we think about the digital world. We think that it is a land of data sets and numbers and metrics and measurements, and that perhaps all might be true. But I think sometimes we're in danger of forgetting that the online world is also a world of words. So if you think about the way that we interact with digital things ourselves as users, words are woven across the websites we use. They are all across the apps that we're tapping every day. They're everywhere in customer emails if we're going back and forth with a brand. They're shouting out of smart speakers, chuntering from chatbots. They are absolutely everywhere. So for users, words are your digital experience. So for brands, they can really be that make or break. So as we said, I'm Meg, and I work for this company. Here's the strange name bit. Why are we called Schwa? That's the first question that most people often have. So let's try something. Let's do our first audience participation bit of the day. I want you to take a deep breath, forget about the stresses of your morning, and say for me, Schwa. It's fun, isn't it? A noise of revelation at the back. So that's the first reason we're called Schwa, is it's fun to say. The second reason is because it's a real word. Does anybody know what it means? Sometimes people do. Yes?
Yeah, I learned this last night. It means it's the most common vowel sound, right?
It's the most common vowel sound, correct. You learned it from one of us?
Yes.
Oh. Oh. Yes. The schwa is the linguistic term for the noise Make that noise for me? Less fun. But you probably don't know that that noise is one of the most common noises you make in your life when you're talking all the time. You don't say a workshop, you say a workshop. You don't say the conference, you say the, mem, re, supply, rhythm. All of these words have a schwa in them, that noise. So the schwa is the linguistic term for the noise and happily, you'll be pleased to know that's got not that much to do with what we're going to talk about today, but it is linguistically geeky, and that is what Schwa is all about. We are a team of writers mainly, and we help businesses all across the world figure out how they want to sound in words and then spread it across their organisation. And we do this with the help of behavioural science, because language can also fundamentally shape how people think and feel about you, as we'll get into. I think when we're talking about all these digital experiences, so these apps, these websites, these emails, there's a little bit of tension. Comfortable tension, maybe. But you might have a hand in creating these things as somebody who works in the marketing team, but they might be partly owned by a different team. The digital team might have involvement, the UX team perhaps. It might report even into a different bit of the business. And sometimes I think these two different teams can have slightly different priorities. So let's start with that digital team's priority and what their priorities are, by way of a fruit bowl. Go with me here, there is a point. So if this fruit bowl was in front of you in the room now, I'm interested to know what you would pick. We'll do this by way of a show of hands. If you had this fruit bowl in front of you, put your hands up if you would choose the banana. Okay, good number for bananas. Apple, more for apple than banana. Pear, not a single, one pear. One pear, and the orange. 3 oranges. So, aside from our pear, I think our reaction was quite typical. When they've done this in studies, our oranges are always the least picked. So in studies of the most picked fruits, and there are studies of the most picked fruits, oranges always fall at the bottom of the queue. Maybe I threw a curveball in with the pear. Why do we think that is? Any ideas?
Messy to eat.
Messy. What else? Effort. Yes, there's a barrier, isn't there? You've got to get the peel off.
Although wasn't there sapsumo in the bottom?
Seeds. Seeds, it's sort of sticky, you've got the peel, you've got to carry this peel around with you for the rest of the day. There is too much of this stuff, friction. And if you work with a digital team, they probably live and breathe the idea of friction. This is priority number one. How do we make a journey as easy and straightforward as possible? How do we get rid of all the friction, the orange peel in our digital journey? How do we cut the steps? How do we make the process easier for users? How do we make it clearer what they need to do next and fast? And I think there's a really interesting idea about how language can play a part, can help or hinder this idea of friction. Language can either make a digital journey faster or it can make a digital journey slower. So if we think about something like error messages, for example, if you are booking a holiday, I feel like this is the story of my life. I'm trying to do something online. I'm going through the whole process. I'm putting the dates in. I'm putting my card details in. I'm choosing the right room, and I see an error message. And often those error messages are incomprehensible, aren't they? Error, what does that mean to me? Failed to initialize. Bad request, bad. And we know what we're like as users. Maybe I will click here to start over, as it says, but probably more likely I'll just log off and start checking Instagram or something more interesting instead. So all of this is what this person called Jacob Nielsen, who is a usability guru, he talks about. He says, never forget that your reader online is lazy, selfish, and ruthless. This isn't a particular set of users, this is all of us. We're all lazy, selfish, and ruthless. We don't want to wade through paragraphs if a sentence will do. We don't want to spend hours looking at something. And in fact, we're only likely to read 20% of the words that are ever written on any given web page. So all our users are lazy, selfish, and ruthless. So how do we cater to them as digital people or marketing people? First thing we can do is make our language more simple. And I think sometimes this can feel quite intrinsic even. It can come naturally. Let's test that theory. I will shout out some not simple words, some long words, and I want you to shout back some shorter words, some simpler words. Ready?
Yeah.
Very ready. Born ready. I can purchase this.
Buy.
Perfect. Require. Need. Can I obtain?
Yes.
So it's intrinsic, right? We know these things. You didn't have to think very long about what could be a better, simpler way to say that. And yes, we're writing in a shorter way, but we're also just writing in a more straightforward way. It's closer to how we would speak. I don't think any of us would say, darling, on the way home, can you stop at Tesco and obtain me some milk? Can you get me some milk? And when you multiply this across our whole digital journey, the results can really speak for themselves. We were working with Eon in 2020 to overhaul their approach to customer chat. So, customer chat, you go online, you've got a question about your boiler, there's that little window in the bottom right-hand screen where an agent is talking to you. Eon were having some issues with these conversations, and this is how they were writing before we started working together. Thank you for providing me with your opening readings. I've submitted your readings for you now, ... I'll also ensure that these same readings are sent on to your previous provider, who will then be able to issue you with an accurate final bill. Please be aware that it could take up to 42 days. And they went on and on. And this was the problem. Their issue was customers were saying, we're not getting answers to our questions. Maybe the answers were in there. They were just buried in reams of text. And it was taking them too long, right? I'm lazy, selfish, and ruthless. I don't have hours to read all of this. I have minutes. So we came in and we helped Eon, and we did two things. We rewrote a bunch of this pre-written content, so kind of templated stuff that they were using in these chats, and we trained their teams to do it themselves. And now the responses look a bit more like this. Thanks for the reading. I've updated your account and sent them on to your old supplier. Look out for a final bill. It can take 42 days. So we're using 3 lines instead of 8 lines. We're using longer words instead of short words. And the result was that users were much happier. They said they were much more likely to promote Eon. It's not surprising because they were getting answers to their questions. upfront, not buried. And the business was happier because it was quicker. Customers were getting answers to their questions. So every chat was being handled 2.5 minutes faster. It doesn't sound like lots, but when you multiply it across every agent, across the business, it adds up to a big time and money saving. So all of this is what a digital or a UX team, I think, can sometimes live or breathe. How do we get rid of the friction? How do we cater for those lazy, selfish, ruthless users? Let's make it really clear. Let's be really short, straightforward, give really clear next steps. And for some companies, like gov.uk, that's enough. If they can communicate something really complicated, like employment law, in a straightforward way, brilliant, what an achievement if you've made that accessible to an everyday user. But I have a hunch. A lot of you are at a marketing conference, and it might not be enough to just be straightforward and clear. You also want your writing to be ownable, beautiful, distinctive, stand out, whatever you want to call it. Because yes, you could be this lamppost, which does its job very well as a lamppost, but wouldn't you rather be this lamppost? So how do you be that lamppost in words? Some companies do it really well and really consistently. If you think of an organisation like Slack, does anybody use Slack at work? And they don't just write in a straightforward way, they write in an interesting way. So when you've seen all your messages on Slack, you've read everything you need to read, it doesn't just say no more messages, it says, sweet potato, you're all done. And when you come back to Slack after time away, it doesn't just say, welcome back. It says, welcome back. You look nice today. Input search, beep boop. Why? I don't know, but I like it. And yes, okay, that kind of Eon writing, where it's really clear and straightforward, that can get great results. But writing like this, that has colour and character and passion and personality, this can get great results as well. In 2009, a couple of researchers called Walker and Glenn, they wanted to test this theory. How far does creative writing help us be more effective as we communicate? And what they did to test the theory was they rounded up a bunch of items to sell on eBay. And they got this stuff from charity shops, from yard sales, as they say in the States, from even stuff, when someone's moving house and puts a bunch of stuff on the pavement. So I don't want to say that the things they had rounded up were junk, but it was the kind of stuff you'd find in your nan's attic. It was sort of tchotchkes or bric-a-brac, knick-knacks, I think you'd say. They had no inherent value, the things that they were selling, in and of themselves, until Walker and Glenn posted them on eBay with a bunch of really compelling stories. So each item got a story written for it. So for example, this ceramic bear isn't just a ceramic bear. It's a ceramic bear who has a story about addiction, about drama, gambling, destruction. It starts like this. This ceramic bear has witnessed electrifying poker hands. You can see it in his eyes. And there was this mystery object as well that Walker and Glenn said, we didn't even know what this was, but we listed it online with a story that began like this. It's certainly something, she said, but what kind of something is it? This, he said, is this something that's going to save our marriage? I want to read on. It's like a Booker Prize-winning novel. There's drama, there's intrigue. I want to know more. I believe it's a dough hook, apparently, they found out later. So all in all, they paid something like $128, not tons of money at the time for all this stuff, because they'd got it from charity shops and dustbins. They sold it for over $3.5K, which meant that their profit was nearly £3,000. The same stuff of no inherent value, but just that creative writing and the little bit of spark made their profit soar. And I think all of this is brand and marketing's bread and butter. How do we add value? By giving something distinctive character and personality. What is that personality? How can we be like Slack and do it consistently all across our organisation, even in those tiny, tiny places? So here are the two demands. It's a conference. There's a Venn diagram. It was a matter of time. But you've got the digital team on one hand saying, let's make it really accessible and straightforward. And then you've got the marketing team on the other hand saying, let's make it really ownable and beautiful. And I think, yes, these things absolutely can live together. It's just about the process and how you get there. So I suppose some quick tips that we found on that process and how you do get there. The first thing is you need to assemble your team. Who do you want on board as you start to write in a certain way as a business? Why is it important? A phenomenon called the IKEA effect. The IKEA effect. It's the reason that I've never got rid of the Billy bookcase that I built when I was a student, because I assembled it with my own hands, right? We value things more if we've had a hand in creating them. So who are your allies across the business? Yes, your marketing and your brand team need to get in the same room as your digital team and figure out this thing about, are we clear or are we beautiful or are we a little bit of both? But who else is there actually thinking beyond this? Your internal comms and HR people. Right? If you can't write a certain way internally, you've got no hope of doing it externally. Legal and compliance, who's likely to put spanners in the works down the line? Get them involved at the start of the process and they'll be less likely to. So get those people involved at the start and then build your tone of voice together. Now, how you define your tone of voice, how you do that process of how do we want to sound, there are lots of different ways to do it. But you could do it with word swaps in a sort of scale, like we just looked at. So same thing again, I'll shout out a formal word. Commence, how would you say? Start, begin, yeah, and maybe you'll say, okay, as a brand, maybe we're commence right now, but as a group, we've decided we want to go to start. But maybe you'll want to push it further, right? That's not where that boundary ends. You could be more slack-like, you could be get cracking. You could push it even further still. Some brands might be in the space of shake a leg, look lively, or even get your arse in gear. Some brands. So figure out as a group where you want to sit on that scale and then get the evidence that it works. And it's up to you how you gather this evidence. These are some stats that we did earlier, but there's A/B testing, there's customer focus groups, there's brand strategy. Was that a question? Please.
So how do you get colloquialisms, which are usually just understood by English-speaking audiences, to kind of localize to different languages also? So for example, get cracking.
Mm-hmm.
What's that going to be like in Spanish, for example, and Chinese and stuff like that?
It's a great question. And my Spanish and Chinese aren't perfect. But it's a really interesting point about not just translation, but transcreation. If this needs to work across the world, then in this stage, we need to get those audiences. So our head of marketing in China, our head of marketing in Spain, they need to get on board. Will this work in those territories? So it's a little bit about the start of the process and who you get in when you're defining the strategy. And then on the execution level, are we going to get a translator? Are we going to get a transcreator who can help us translate not just word for word what we're saying, but also the kind of idiomatic spirit, making it sound like get cracking in whatever language it might be. So getting those different audiences, I think, globally involved at the start is another great shout. So then getting this evidence, you've taken it to the business, you've proved it's working, so you can spread it further to your teams. And that's kind of the crucial point, spreading it around your business. Because when we're talking about writing online, it's not just going to be your copywriters or your expert marketers or your content wizards who are writing every word that you put out to the world. Often, those customer chats are going to be somebody in your customer care team. You know, the footer on your website, that might be your legal team. The developer might write some of the chatbot themselves. So it's not the case that a writer will have their fingerprints on absolutely everything that goes out there. We need to get the business on board and upskilled to do these things themselves. Does that make sense? Fabulous. So that's my final thought, really, is train them. And training, I think, sounds like a horrible word. It sounds like a diktat. But it doesn't have to be. It can be interactive and it can be interesting. Would you like to try one quick training exercise to see what that can feel like? Yay! They're desperate. So, error message again. Let's go back to those error messages. So as I said, often error messages online, they're just incomprehensible. This is one from Microsoft. The story goes that some of Microsoft's own developers hacked into their error message system in the 90s. I don't know, it was after hours at one point. So the error messages that were like this, they were incomprehensible, they rewrote them as haikus. Yesterday it worked. Today it is not working. Windows is like that. So this is a haiku. And it's 17 syllables long with a very specific syllable count on each line. Another one they did was 3 things are certain: death, taxes, and lost data. Guess which has occurred? So, I'm going to ask you to tell me about your business, what the products you sell, the services you provide. I'm not going to give you an hour to write an About Us paragraph. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to tell me about your business as a haiku. Off you go. Okay, finish the line you're on. Count up those syllables. Okay, pens down or fingers off keys. How was that? Good. Nothing like a deadline. I like doing it because it doesn't matter who you get, doesn't matter if they're marketing people or accountants. Everybody counts on their fingers. Does anybody think that they hit the syllable count on their... A hand up. Yes, I definitely did. Please, can we hear your haiku?
I'm just going to give you the mic. Hang on 2
yes,
seconds.
thank you, Lisa.
It's either that or getting up on stage. I'll put you.
Thanks. We are a funder who needs to be a fintech. It's like herding cats.
We are a funder who needs to be a fintech. It's like herding cats. Oh, it's like herding cats.
It is like herding cats.
It is like herding cats. We'll let you have it. No, lovely. Thank you very much. And what's your business? Very nice. And even a little bit of simile there, right? It's like herding cats. We've got this tiny little space, but we've got these creative expressions in such a tiny little space. Who else thinks they hit the syllable count on the head? Yes, please.
A fashion network integrated across apps, Box, the Content Cloud.
Oh, a fashion...
A fascia network integrated across apps, Box, the Content Cloud.
Box the content
Cloud.
cloud. I'm just impressed that you managed to get integrated, 4-syllable word, into a haiku. That's brilliant. Very good. One more. Oh, let's have this chap at the front.
We're health for your head. We'll help you all the way through and get back to life.
Oh, and get back to life. What a lovely ending at the end there. Get back to life. Thank you very much for doing that. I wish I could say that the advice from Schwa was to leave this masterclass and go forth and write everything that you do as a business in haiku form. I don't want you to take that away from today's session. It's just one of these really handy tools that we can do in that training environment to help people practice these things themselves, because it's a really handy planning tool, right? What is my main message? What am I trying to say? And whatever you're writing, you're going to have a lot more than 17 syllables. But how would I say this if I did only have 17 syllables? So thinking about your main message and digesting it into its simplest form. And then, as we said, it's a limit, it's a constriction, it's a constraint, and constraints can make us more creative, like a simile, herding cats, even in that tiny space. So yes, to our kind of Venn diagram again, haikus make us write short and clear and accessibly, but they also help us practice that creativity and get that spark. And I think those two things, the accessibility and the ownability, the personality, bridging the gap between them is exactly where you want to be as a business, yes, online, but also as an organisation.